Thank you for joining us for CBN NewsWatch. I'm Ephraim Graham. Ahead today, it has become one of the biggest issues for parents across America. Should minors get treatments to change their gender? We're going to take a look at the controversy as courts are now starting to weigh in. The Biden administration defending its deal to get 5 Americans out of prison in Iran. We're going to hear why some critics say Iran can use the money from the deal for its nuclear program and terrorism. Are you getting enough rest? Not just sleep, but rest and relaxation. A Christian doctor explains why it is so important to help you avoid getting burnt out. And with car prices and repair costs going up and up, one ministry called God's Garage is helping single moms and widows with their transportation needs. All those stories and more ahead today on CBN NewsWatch.
This is CBN NewsWatch.
I want to begin this half hour with what's become one of the top issues for Americans across the country: transgender surgeries and treatments for minors. From 2016 to 2019, transgender surgeries nearly tripled in the U.S., and nearly 8% of patients receiving trans medical care were children between the ages of 8 and 12. States across the nation are passing laws restricting trans surgeries, along with puberty blockers and hormones for children. But trans activists are fighting back. As Charlene Aaron reports, the nation's courts are weighing in on the debate.
Trans activists are challenging state bans on gender-affirming care in federal courts across the country. If these courts reach different conclusions, the Supreme Court may ultimately have to weigh in. Christy Sisson recalls the pain of her college daughter's decision to become a man.
She started taking testosterone, and within 6 months, her voice had dropped. She had started growing facial hair.
Eventually, she chose a double mastectomy. A new report in the Journal of the American Medical Association shows transgender surgeries nearly tripled in the U.S. between 2016 and 2019, the numbers rising from about 4,500 to an astounding 13,000. Researchers estimate those numbers may be even higher. And almost 8% of those patients were children between the ages of 8 and 12 years old. 19-year-old Chloe Cole says she lived as a transgender boy for years before returning to her female identity. She testified recently at a congressional hearing on gender-affirming care for children.
The gender specialist I was taken to see told my parents that I needed to be put on puberty-blocking drugs right away. They asked my parents a simple question: would you rather have a dead daughter or a living transgender son? The choice was enough for my parents to let their guard down.
After taking puberty blockers and testosterone, Chloe, who is suing Kaiser Permanente for providing gender transitioning treatment and surgery when she was just 15, now lives with regret.
I look in the mirror sometimes and I feel like a monster.
The medical professionals are pushing this because once the kids start taking hormones, they're on them for the rest of their lives. So this is a big money maker for the medical community.
Mary Rice Hassan, attorney and policy expert at the Ethics and Public Policy Center, agrees.
Putting minors on puberty-suppressing drugs and then putting them on what are called cross-sex hormones, which are really toxic doses, high doses of hormones, testosterone or estrogen, and then oftentimes leading towards surgery. And we know that this means once a kid goes down this path, they become a medical customer for life.
Despite the trend, there is a growing resistance. More than 20 Republican-led states have adopted laws restricting medical care for transgender children. A Missouri law bans trans surgery for children and prohibits prescribing puberty blockers or hormones to patients under 18. That's also the law in North Carolina, where GOP lawmakers overrode Democratic Governor Roy Cooper's veto of several bills banning medical care for transgender minors.
I'm thankful that the legislators here in North Carolina have acted on their conscience and have done what they could to protect youth from these awful drugs that are being given to children. Thankfully, the conservative majority made it happen.
In Missouri and Texas, judges allowed the ban to go forward, while an Arkansas judge ruled against the state's legislation banning gender-affirming health care for minors. With many of these laws facing such lawsuits and higher courts disagreeing, Hassan and other legal experts believe the Supreme Court will ultimately need to weigh in.
So even though you have those states doing that good work, we have an equal number of states, unfortunately, that have become very aggressive, where the attorneys general from those particular states are saying, no, we think parents should be able to choose this, quote, gender-affirming care. And so they're trying to wrap it up in parental rights.
She is looking for the High Court to decide in those states' favor.
What I'm hoping the Supreme Court will do when this lands again in their lap is to underscore the reality of sex, male or female. It's determined at conception. It can't change.
The pressure to evaluate the science is building. The American Academy of Pediatrics has asked an outside commission to review the medical evidence for transgender medical treatment for children. Still, Hassan is suspicious because of the Academy's current policy.
I'm not very confident simply because at the same time they're saying they're going to do this evidence review, they came out and they said, well, we're supporting the policy as is, and our purpose in doing this is so that we can push back on any limits, any attempt to protect children from these interventions that have lifelong, irreversible consequences.
As the battle wages on, Hassan says protecting the hearts, bodies, and minds of the nation's youth is worth the fight.
It's going to take a lot of work. It's going to take a lot of people having the courage of their convictions, speaking the truth, reaching out to those who've been led down a false path, and reaching out with love and compassion, but a willingness to speak the truth.
Charlene Aaron, CBN News.
Coming up, the Biden administration is defending its deal with Iran for the release of 5 American prisoners. But Republicans say Iran can use the money from the deal for its nuclear program and terrorism. We're going to have that story for you when we come back. 5 freed Americans are finally back in the United States after years of being imprisoned in Iran. But as they celebrate their long-awaited freedom with their families, the Biden administration is coming under fire for the terms of the hostage swap, which included unfreezing $6 billion in Iranian funds. CBN White House correspondent Abigail Robertson brings us a look at why critics are concerned this money will be used to fund terrorism.
The U.S. Department of State says the 5 freed prisoners, some of whom have been held captive for years, are survivors of unspeakable cruelty after serving time for fabricated crimes. The freed Americans arrived in the U.S. early Tuesday morning, 3 of them in prison more than 5 years on convictions of espionage. The other 2 U.S. citizens wish to remain private. In exchange, the U.S. granted clemency to 5 Iranians held in the U.S., but critics argue it was hardly an even trade, since Secretary of State Antony Blinken also agreed to unfreeze $6 billion in Iranian funds.
An even swap of at least the same number of citizens is something that can be tolerable. But when you have to sweeten it with $1.2 billion per American to get them out, where's our $6 billion? But it makes no sense. And it does become the biggest ransom in history.
Victoria Coates from the Heritage Foundation believes the deal is a threat to the U.S. and its allies.
If he thinks that this isn't going to free up $6 billion, that now that regime does not have to spend on things like food and medicine, to spend on their nuclear program, on their terrorist proxies, on their missile program to strike Israel and even the United States, of course that's what they're going to do with it. That's what they did with the cash they got from the original nuclear deal under President Obama.
Republicans charge that the deal amounts to a ransom payment and warn it will encourage future hostage-taking.
The latest example of President Biden rewarding and incentivizing Tehran's bad behavior.
Democrat Mark Warner, chairman of the Senate Intelligence Committee, questioned on CBS how the funds will be used.
I want to hear what kind of constraints are being put on in this exchange in terms of what has been reported of the $6 billion that...
Blinken says the funds, Iranian oil revenue once frozen in South Korea, are now in a bank in Qatar and can only be used for humanitarian purposes.
We have absolute oversight of how they're used, and they can only be used for humanitarian purposes. And we have absolute confidence in the process and the system.
While the Biden administration insists they will approve each transaction, Iran's president says the country will use the $6 billion however it wants to. Tensions are still high between the two nations, the U.S. already boosting its military presence in the Middle East to counter Iran's harassment of shipping tankers in the region. Both presidents are at the UN this week, but have no plans to meet. Abigail Robertson, CBN News.
Here's a quick look at some of the other stories we're following for you beyond the headlines. The national debt keeps exploding upward, hitting a record $33 trillion Monday. The latest landmark comes as Congress is involved in a new fight over spending that could lead to a government shutdown. Former President Donald Trump will skip the next Republican debate to be held at the Reagan Library in California next Wednesday. Former president instead will meet with striking auto workers in Michigan. He also passed on the first Republican debate. And many experts believe there is scientific evidence to back up the biblical account of the destruction of Sodom found in Genesis 19. Evidence points to a sudden high-temperature destructive event. Some material in the area matches what was left on the desert floor after the atomic test in New Mexico in 1945. You can find the details of these important stories at cbnnews.com. Still ahead, are you getting enough rest? Not just sleep, but rest, taking a break. We're going to hear from a Christian doctor who explains why it is so important. That's coming up right after this. Too many people are burnt out and in need of restoration. Getting back your sanity, energy, and spiritual balance is the subject of this week's Healthy Living Show, where CBN medical reporter Lori Johnson spoke with a Christian doctor who offers advice after she made her own way back from burnout.
And so it was during my own burnout journey that I began this book process. I wanted to stay a physician. I didn't want to get to a place where I had to give up the career that I love because of exhaustion. And so because of my background being in research and biochemistry, I wanted to make sure that when I took the facts and things that I learned, that I could actually make them applicable to everyday life so that my patients could benefit from it, from the people from my church could benefit from it. And everything that I started researching all drove me back to Scripture. It all drove me back to looking at, so what does the Bible say about this?
Well, you as a physician, you know, we hear in the headlines so often that physicians are one of those types of careers where people do experience tremendous burnout and actually leave the profession. What types of things were you experiencing when you talk about burnout? And how can other people, those of us who aren't doctors, know if we are also burned out? I mean, what does that feel like?
Yeah, and for myself, it really came down to I didn't have the energy to do the things that I loved. And when we look at the World Health Organization, when they define burnout, there are three characteristics that they say that someone would have is, number one, they're tired all the time. Number two, the work they're doing is at a lesser quality of what they're capable of. And number three, they no longer find enjoyment in the work that they do. And so I feel like we have a lot of people who functionally are burned out. They show up at work every day, they do a job, but they are not happy about being there. They're tired while they're there, and they're not performing at their best.
And so these types of descriptions sound a lot like, as I mentioned, anxiety, but also a little bit like depression as well, which we see people suffering from. And, you know, when you talk about rest, a lot of people would think, you know, I need to get more sleep or I need to go on a vacation. But sometimes people don't feel replenished or rested even after they've had 8 hours or even after they've gone on a vacation. You know, people say, I need a vacation from my vacation. It was so stressful. I recently had a vacation like that with all my family. So what do you say to, you know, people who think the answer is just more sleep or a vacation?
Yeah, I love that question about vacations because I think that is how most people are trying to solve their burnout. They're trying to wait till the next vacation, wait till their next sabbatical. And really, rest can't be divided up like that where you're only getting restored during specific times spread throughout the year. It needs to be something that's sustainable. And I think that's the mindset shift that most of us have to make, is that rest isn't just cessation. Sleeping's fantastic. We all need to sleep.
Yes.
But sleeping is primarily cessation. We stop doing activity. Rest is about restoration. You want to be poured back into. And a lot of us, the reason that sleep is not actually feeling like an improvement for our lives is because it's not restorative. We haven't gotten to the levels of deeper sleep where we feel restored, and we don't understand this connection between sleep and rest, because for a lot of us, higher quality rest will actually help us to have improved sleep.
All right, so let's talk about how do you rest. We know, obviously, in the Bible that the word teaches us that God rested on the seventh day, and so he wasn't sleeping. But what does it mean to rest?
So the way I look at it is we look at all the different areas of our life where we're pouring out energy. And if you're pouring out energy in an area, then it can become depleted. And so you want to pour back into those places. That's the restorative component. That's what rest is. And so in my research, what we found were there were actually 7 different key areas where people were needing consistent restoration to stay at their highest level of capacity. And those included physical, mental, spiritual, emotional, social, sensory, and creative.
You can learn more about the importance of rest tonight on Healthy Living. The show begins at 8:30 Eastern. You can find it on the CBN News channel or the CBN News app. You can also watch it on YouTube. Coming up, with prices for new cars and car repairs on the increase, we're going to hear from one ministry called God's Garage. It's helping moms and widows in need of transportation. We'll have that story for you when we come back. Stay with us. In today's tight economy, prices for new automobiles are up 4% over last year, and car repair costs have gone up as well, forcing some people to go without transportation. But for the last 12 years, one Texas ministry called God's Garage has been making a difference. Executive Director Justin Coggins joined this week's Prayer Link program on the CBN News channel to talk about how they are helping single moms and widows in need.
Justin, welcome to the show.
Hey, thank you so much for having me. It is a pleasure for sure.
Well, first of all, where did this idea for God's Garage come from?
Well, it started, our founder actually was a pastor, and he loved tinkering with cars and working on vehicles. And long story short, there happened to be a single mom walking on a very, very busy roadway here in Conroe, Texas. And it happened to be in the evening. He stops by, finds out why is she walking on this road at this time of day in such heavy traffic. And come to find out, the single mom actually had a vehicle. It was in a shop, but she could not afford to get it out or finish the repairs on it. So then that's when action was taken. Vehicle was scrounged up some money, and the vehicle was removed from the shop, and they were able to work on it and get that vehicle fixed. And right then and there, that's where single moms started a role in God's Garage.
I love it. And as a former single mother, I know the difficulty of having a car that needs repair and you can't afford it. So you guys are doing a great thing. And as we mentioned, today, everything is more expensive, including buying a car and car maintenance. This is especially hard for single moms, as you mentioned, including widows as well, and wives of deployed military. What are some of the struggles that you're hearing that these women are facing?
It's just what you said. It's hard times. Vehicle prices are up, and our target audience is those single moms, widows, and wives of deployed military who actually are having financial struggles. And so the way we meet those needs is by receiving donated vehicles from the public, and those donated vehicles come into our shop. And we spend time, hours, money, everything that's needed to get those vehicles up and running. And then our job is to turn around and give those vehicles away to a much needed single mom, widow, or wife of deployed military.
So you're helping to repair vehicles for these single moms, and you also help those who need a dependable car, and you're giving them to them for free. What has that been like? Oh my gosh.
Yeah, you can only imagine. Like it's every time we give a vehicle away, and over the last 2 years, last year we gave away 94 vehicles. The year before that, around 95, 96 vehicles. And so every single one of them is heart moving. It'll bring you to tears because of the struggle. We take for granted things like transportation, being able to go to the store whenever we want to, being able to make a doctor's appointment and get there whenever we want to. And these single moms and widows have a hard time. They are relying on transportation from the city if they're in the city. If you're outside of the city, you have no way of getting around unless your grandmother or somebody offers a ride. So everything is dictated by others around you when you can go and get these things done. So having these vehicles in a single mom or a widow's hand brings consistency back to their life. It helps them get their kids to school on time, on a daily basis. It helps them get to the grocery store when they want to get there. It helps them get the doctor's appointments. It helps them in multiple ways. And so it is beyond rewarding to see one of these cars going to one of these ladies who's much in need.
And you can get more spiritually uplifting information on this week's episode of Prayer Link. It's on the CBN News Channel Wednesday at 2:30 p.m. Eastern. You can also catch it on the CBN News app or on YouTube. Time now for your Tuesday Tweetable. It's a message I pray will motivate you, and you will post, tag, tweet, and share it with those in your circles of influence. Facts and truth are not always the same. Truth is a person. His name is Jesus, and his word is greater than any fact. It is truth. Fact may say you're in pain. Truth says you're healed. Fact may say you have more bills than money. Truth is God will provide everything you need. Fact may say you're alone, but truth is God is with you always. That will do it for this edition of CBN NewsWatch. You can always find more of our programs on the CBN News Channel or at cbnnews.com at any time. Make it a great Tuesday. Join us right back here, same time tomorrow. Goodbye. God bless.